There is something quietly working in your life right now. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but it is there. It is shaping the way money moves toward you and away from you. It is determining whether your financial situation improves this year or stays exactly where it is. And the strange thing is this: most people will go their entire lives without recognizing it. Not because it is hidden behind some complicated formula, not because it requires a degree in economics or a background in finance. It is hidden because it sits inside something we rarely think to examine: our own behavior. That is where this audiobook begins, not with numbers, not with investment strategies or savings accounts or stock portfolios. It begins with the question that almost no one asks. Why do some people consistently build wealth over time, while others, sometimes earning just as much, sometimes earning even more, remain stuck in the same financial place year after year? You have probably seen this pattern play out in your own life. You earn more than you did a few years ago, and yet somehow the extra money disappears. The pressure does not feel much different. The savings look roughly the same. Maybe you have had moments where you sat down and told yourself this time things would be different. This time you would be more careful, more deliberate, more disciplined, and then a few weeks passed, and old patterns returned, and the month ended the way it always does. That experience is not unique to you. It is one of the most common financial experiences in the world. And it is not because you are careless with money. It is not because you lack intelligence or ambition. It is because most of us were never taught the real reason money behaves the way it does in our lives. We were taught that if you work hard, money will come. We were taught that if you save a little here and there, things will eventually improve. We were taught that the right opportunity, the right investment, the right moment will change everything. But no one sat us down and said this: money does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you consistently do. That is the law this audiobook is about. Not a law written in any textbook. Not a regulation passed by any government. A law of behavior, a pattern that operates quietly, steadily, without apology. It does not care about your income level. It does not care about your ambitions. It does not care how badly you want to be financially secure. It only responds to patterns, to behavior, to the daily, weekly, monthly choices you make, whether you think about them consciously or not. Before we go deeper, take a moment to consider something. Think about the last time you received an unexpected sum of money, a bonus, a tax refund, a gift, an inheritance. Think about what happened to it. Did it go towards something you had planned? Did it disappear faster than expected? Did it create a moment of relief, followed shortly by a return to the same financial pressure you had felt before? For most people, the answer is the last one. And that pattern, that cycle, is not random. It is the law at work, not punishing you, not rewarding anyone else more than you deserve, simply reflecting back the behaviors you have been practicing, over and over, until they became automatic. That is what this audiobook is about. It is about understanding the law before it controls your outcomes any further. It is about becoming aware of the pattern so that you can begin to work with it, not against it. There is no dramatic transformation promised here, no shortcuts, no overnight success. What you will find in this audiobook is something more valuable than either of those things. Clarity. The kind that makes you look at your financial life with calm, steady eyes. The kind that helps you see why things are the way they are. And more importantly, what it actually takes to change them. The hidden law is not a secret kept by the wealthy few. It is simply a principle that most people have not stopped long enough to notice. You are stopping now. That is where this begins. Let us be honest about something. Financial struggle is not rare. It is not unusual. It is not reserved for people who made terrible decisions or lived recklessly. Across all income levels, across countries and cultures and generations, a pattern repeats. Most people feel like they do not have quite enough. Most people feel like their money disappears faster than it arrives. Most people feel some version of financial anxiety, whether they talk about it openly or carry it quietly in the back of their minds. The question is not whether this experience is common. The question is why. Because if we can understand why, we can begin to change it. The first reason most people struggle with money is simpler than anyone wants to admit. They do not actually know where their money goes. Not in any precise way. They have a general sense of their income. They know roughly what their major expenses are. But the smaller, daily decisions, the ones that quietly add up, often go unexamined. The coffee that becomes a habit. The subscription that was signed up for but rarely used. The meal that was bought because the morning was hectic. The impulse purchase that felt small but happened 6 times that week. Individually, none of these feels significant. Together, they can represent a substantial portion of what is available to save or invest. But without looking closely, without tracking, without honest awareness, it is impossible to see that pattern. And so money moves through life in a blur, arriving, disappearing, and leaving behind a quiet confusion about where it all went. The second reason is tied to the first. Most people relate to money emotionally rather than strategically. This is understandable. Money is deeply tied to feelings. It connects to security and fear, to status and self-worth, to pleasure and comfort. When you feel stressed, spending can feel like relief. When you feel successful, spending can feel like a reward. When you feel uncertain about the future, spending on something immediate can feel better than thinking about something distant. These emotional connections are not weaknesses. They are human, but they create decisions that are driven by how you feel in the moment, rather than what serves your long-term financial health. And when decisions are made emotionally, they tend to repeat. Because the emotion returns, the stress comes back. The need for comfort returns. The desire for a reward surfaces again, and the spending follows. Not because you are undisciplined by nature, but because the emotional trigger keeps appearing, and the behavior keeps responding to it. The third reason most people struggle is a misunderstanding about what money actually rewards. There is a widely held belief that money rewards effort. That if you work hard enough, long enough, and with enough intensity, financial security will follow. And in a basic sense, income can reflect effort. But wealth, genuine financial stability, the kind that grows over time, does not reward effort alone. It rewards behavior, consistent, structured, deliberate behavior. You can work extremely hard and still find yourself financially stuck if the behavior surrounding that income is not aligned with long-term growth. This distinction matters enormously, because if you believe money rewards effort, you focus on working more, and more effort without structured behavior simply means more income cycling through the same patterns. The fourth reason is a deeply uncomfortable one. Most people avoid looking at their financial situation with honest clarity. Not because they are irresponsible, but because looking closely feels painful. There is a particular kind of emotional discomfort that comes with examining your finances honestly. It can feel like confronting failure. It can surface guilt about past decisions. It can expose a gap between where you are and where you thought you would be by now. And so avoidance becomes the easier path. Not looking too carefully, not adding up the numbers, not opening that statement or sitting down to review the budget. The avoidance feels protective in the short term, but it allows the pattern to continue undisturbed, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. The fifth reason is the absence of structure. Most people manage money reactively. They spend when they need to. They save when something is left over. They pay bills when they arrive. They think about retirement when someone brings it up. There is no system in place, no automatic process that ensures money moves in a deliberate direction regardless of how the month feels emotionally. Reactive money management means your financial life is shaped by circumstances, by whatever comes up, by how tired you are, by how stressed you are, by what you happen to notice in a store. Proactive money management means your financial behavior happens by design, not by default. And the absence of that design is why most people's financial situation looks roughly the same year after year, even when their income increases. None of these reasons require blame. None of them suggest a character flaw. They are simply patterns. Patterns that can be understood. Patterns that can be changed. But first, they need to be seen. And that is what this audiobook is slowly building toward. Because once you see the pattern clearly, the next step becomes far more obvious than it has ever been. Now we arrive at the law itself, the principle this entire audiobook has been building toward. And when you hear it, you may feel one of two things. You may feel that it is simpler than you expected, or you may feel that you already knew it. Either reaction is worth examining, because knowing something and applying it consistently are two very different experiences. Here's the hidden law. Money follows behavior, not intention, not desire, not potential behavior. The way you handle money today is shaping what your financial situation looks like in 1 year, in 5 years, in 20 years. Not the size of your ambitions, not the strength of your desire for financial security. The behavior. Let us sit with that for a moment, because it shifts the entire conversation. Most financial advice focuses on what you should do: save more, spend less, invest early, build an emergency fund, diversify your portfolio. All of that is useful, but it starts from the wrong place. It assumes that knowing what to do is the obstacle. It is not. The obstacle is the gap between knowing and doing, and that gap is filled by behavior, your daily behavior, your weekly habits, your automatic responses to financial situations, the way you react when money arrives, the way you respond when you feel stressed, the way you make small decisions without fully thinking them through. All of that behavior is quietly building your financial future, whether you intend it to or not. Now, to understand this law more deeply, you need to understand something about how behavior works. Behavior is not random, it follows patterns, and those patterns are largely shaped by habit, emotion, and environment. When a behavior is repeated enough times, it stops requiring conscious thought. It becomes automatic. You do not decide to check your phone in the morning. You just do it. You do not decide to reach for something sweet when you feel stressed. It simply happens. The same thing applies to financial behavior. You do not always decide to spend. It simply happens. The decision to buy something small, the impulse purchase, the casual upgrade, often bypasses deliberate thought entirely. It runs on habit, on emotional autopilot. And because it bypasses thought, it also bypasses intention. You could have every intention of saving more this month, and still end the month having saved nothing, because the behavior runs underneath the intention. This is why the hidden law matters so much. It is not enough to want different financial outcomes. You have to build different financial behaviors. Let us go deeper into what behavior actually means in this context. Behavior, when it comes to money, operates across 3 dimensions. The first dimension is daily behavior. These are the small, recurring decisions you make without much thought. What you spend your money on in casual moments. Whether you check your balance regularly. Whether you track your purchases. Whether you pause before a small purchase or move forward automatically. These decisions feel inconsequential in isolation, but they compound. Over 30 days, over 12 months, over 10 years, daily behavior creates a clear financial trajectory. It either moves you steadily towards stability and growth, or it maintains the same cycle of earn and deplete. The second dimension is reactive behavior. This is how you respond when something unexpected happens. When your income increases, do you immediately increase your spending? When you receive an unexpected sum, does it disappear within days? When you face a financial setback, do you make impulsive decisions to compensate? Reactive behavior is perhaps the most revealing, because it shows what your financial defaults are. When there is no plan in place, behavior defaults to whatever is most habitual, most comfortable. or most emotionally driven. And for most people, those defaults do not support long-term financial growth. The third dimension is structural behavior. These are the decisions that set up the environment in which your daily and reactive behaviors operate. Do you have a budget? Do you have automatic savings in place? Do you have clear financial goals written down and reviewed regularly? Do you have a system that moves money deliberately before emotion has a chance to intervene? Structural behavior is the most powerful of the three dimensions because it shapes everything that happens underneath it. When your structure is strong, your daily behavior improves automatically. You do not have to rely on willpower alone. The system does a portion of the work for you. Now, the law that money follows behavior is not just about individual decisions. It is about patterns over time. And here is where the concept of compounding becomes essential. Compounding is usually discussed in the context of investing. Small returns, reinvested consistently over long periods, create substantial wealth. That principle applies equally to behavior. Small financial behaviors, practiced consistently over long periods, create substantial outcomes. In both directions, positive behaviors, practiced consistently, build stability and wealth over time. Negative behaviors, practiced consistently, erode financial health over time, and neither direction requires dramatic decisions. The accumulation happens quietly, in the ordinary moments, in the daily habits, in the automatic responses. Consider two people at the same income level. They earn the same amount. They live in the same city. They have similar expenses. The difference is behavior. One person spends before they save. One person saves before they spend. One person treats an income increase as an invitation to spend more. One person treats an income increase as an opportunity to save more. One person makes financial decisions based on how they feel in the moment. One person makes financial decisions based on a structure they have built in advance. In the short term, the difference between these two people may be barely visible. After 1 year, the gap is noticeable. After 5 years, the gap is significant. After 20 years, the gap is dramatic. And the difference was never about income. It was always about behavior. This is the law. It is not glamorous. It does not make for exciting financial advice. It does not promise quick transformation. But it is the closest thing to a reliable truth when it comes to how money moves in your life. Let us look at another dimension of this law. Money does not just follow behavior generally. It follows specific behaviors: consistency, control, long-term thinking. These three qualities, practiced over time, are what move financial outcomes in a meaningful direction. Consistency means that your financial behavior does not depend on motivation. It does not change based on how enthusiastic you feel this month. It does not collapse the moment something unexpected happens. Consistent behavior is the behavior that continues quietly in the background, regardless of how dramatic the circumstances become. You save the same amount every month, not only when you feel financially confident, not only when things are going well, every month, even when it is difficult, even when you have a reason to pause. Consistency. Control means that you make decisions by design rather than by default. It means that your financial life has a structure, a system that guides where money goes before emotion, impulse, or circumstance can intervene. Control is not about restriction. It is not about denying yourself everything. It is about knowing with clarity where your money is going and why. When you have control, you are not left wondering where the month went. You know, because you decided in advance. Long-term thinking means that your present decisions are connected to a future version of your life. It means that when you make a financial choice today, you are asking not just how this feels right now, but how this serves where I am going. Long-term thinking is perhaps the most difficult of the three, because the future is abstract, and the present is immediate. The pleasure of a purchase today is tangible. The benefit of a saved $10 years from now is distant and uncertain, but the ability to consistently prioritize the long term over the short Term is one of the clearest predictors of financial stability. These three qualities, consistency, control, and long-term thinking, are not traits that some people are born with and others are not. They are skills. They are habits. They are behaviors that can be developed. And that is the quiet power inside this hidden law. It is not a law that favors the privileged. It is not a law that rewards only those with wealth already. It is a law that responds to behavior, and behavior can be changed. That is where we go next. You already know what you should do. Most people do. Save more than you spend, invest consistently, build an emergency fund. Avoid high-interest debt, live below your means. You have heard these ideas before. You have probably agreed with them. You may have even repeated them. And yet, if you examine your financial life honestly, there is likely a gap between what you know and what you consistently do. That gap is one of the most important things to understand about money, because until you close that gap, the knowledge does not matter. Understanding the right financial behaviors is useful, but it is not enough. And the reason it is not enough comes down to one of the most underestimated forces in human behavior: the pull of the present moment. The present moment is powerful. It is immediate, it is real, it is vivid. The future, by contrast, is abstract. It exists only as an idea. When you hold a desire to be financially secure in 10 years alongside a desire for something enjoyable right now, the present desire almost always has an unfair advantage. Not because you are short-sighted, not because you are irresponsible, but because that is how the human brain is wired. We prioritize what is immediate. We give heavier weight to what is in front of us right now than to what is coming eventually. Psychologists call this present bias, and it explains a great deal of the gap between financial intention and financial action. You genuinely intend to save more. Then the week unfolds. Something comes up. Something feels necessary. Something feels deserved. And the saving does not happen, not because you changed your mind, but because the present moment offered something more tangible than the future goal. Understanding this does not fix it. But it is the starting point, because once you understand that the gap between intention and action is not a willpower problem, but a design problem, the solution becomes clearer. You stop trying to feel more motivated, and you start building better structures. But before we get to structure, let us understand the gap more fully, because it operates across several layers. The first layer is the motivation trap. Most people approach financial change through motivation. They read something inspiring. They have a conversation that shifts their perspective. They have a difficult financial experience that shocks them into awareness, and in that moment they feel ready to change. They feel the clarity of intention. They make a plan. They commit. And then motivation fades, because motivation always fades. It is not a sustainable resource. It rises and falls based on mood, energy, circumstances, and the countless small demands of daily life. A financial plan built entirely on motivation will work only as long as the motivation lasts. When the motivation dips, the behavior dips with it. And because the behavior is inconsistent, the outcomes are inconsistent. And because the outcomes are inconsistent, the disappointment compounds. And because the disappointment compounds, it becomes even harder to sustain motivation. This cycle is exhausting, and it is incredibly common. The way out is not to find more motivation. The way out is to build a system that does not depend on motivation at all. We will come back to that. But first, the second layer of the gap. The second layer is the belief that future behavior will be different from current behavior. This is sometimes called optimistic projection, and it sounds like this. Next month I will be more careful. Once things settle down, I will get serious about saving. When I earn a bit more, I will start investing. After this expense passes, I will build my emergency fund. There is a logic to this thinking. It feels reasonable to say that circumstances will change and therefore behavior will follow. But what actually happens is this. Next month arrives, and the circumstances are different. But the habits are the same. The new expense appears, the new distraction surfaces, the new reason to delay appears, and the behavior remains largely unchanged. Because behavior does not change automatically when circumstances change. Behavior changes when you deliberately work to change it, not when you wait for the right conditions. The right conditions almost never arrive. Life is always slightly too complicated. Timing is almost never perfect, and the person who waits for the ideal moment to begin saving or investing or building financial discipline will often wait far longer than they ever intended. The third layer of the gap is the mismatch between identity and behavior. This is a more subtle one. Many people hold a self-image that is financially responsible. They see themselves as someone who is careful with money, someone who is aware, someone who would make good financial decisions if only the circumstances allowed. But when they look at their actual behavior, there is a contradiction. The spending does not match the self-image. The saving does not match the intention, and rather than confront the contradiction directly, the mind does something interesting. It finds reasons for the gap. The month was unusually difficult. The expenses were exceptional this time. Once things normalize, the behavior will catch up to the self-image. This process of justification is not dishonesty. It is a natural psychological response to the discomfort of inconsistency. But it keeps the gap open, because as long as the gap between identity and behavior is explained away, there is no urgent reason to close it. The fourth layer of the gap is the absence of feedback. When you make good financial decisions consistently over weeks and months, the reward is slow. It is quiet. It does not feel exciting. You transfer money to a savings account. Nothing dramatic happens. You skip a purchase. You do not feel wealthy. You pay down debt methodically. The number moves slowly. The feedback from disciplined financial behavior is delayed and muted, but the feedback from immediate financial pleasure is instant and vivid. The purchase feels good right now. The meal, the item, the experience, it delivers its satisfaction immediately, and so behavior tends to drift toward the thing that provides faster, more vivid feedback. This is not a moral failing. It is the natural result of how reward systems work in the brain. But understanding it gives you leverage, because when you create systems that generate more visible, more immediate feedback for positive financial behavior, you start to shift that pull, tracking your savings visually, setting specific milestones that celebrate progress, making the long-term goal more vivid and tangible. All of these strategies work with the brain's reward system rather than against it. The fifth layer is perhaps the most honest one to name. Fear, not fear of failure. Fear of what you might find when you look closely. Fear of discovering how far behind you are. Fear of confirming that the situation is worse than you thought. Fear of the discomfort that honest financial awareness brings. And so the gap between intention and action is, in part, maintained by the protective distance that avoidance creates. If you never look closely, you never have to fully confront the picture. And there is a strange comfort in not looking. But that comfort comes at a cost, because the gap only closes when you look, when you examine the numbers without flinching, when you see the pattern clearly enough to interrupt it, when you trade the short-term comfort of not knowing for the longer-term clarity of honest awareness. That is how the gap begins to close. Not all at once, not in a dramatic moment of transformation, but gradually through consistent, honest engagement with your actual financial behavior. Here is something worth holding on to. Every person who has successfully changed their financial situation did not do it because they suddenly became more disciplined than they used to be. They did it because they built a structure that made disciplined behavior easier. They did it because they stopped relying on motivation and started designing systems. They did it because they closed the gap, not through willpower alone, but through awareness, design, and repetition. The gap between intention and action is real. It is not a personal weakness. It is a structural problem, and structural problems have structural solutions. That is what the rest of this audiobook explores. Money and emotion are inseparable. You may not want them to be. You may prefer to think of your financial decisions as rational, calculated, and deliberate. But the research is clear, and if you examine your own experience honestly, you will recognize it too. A significant portion of financial decisions are driven by emotion. Not analysis, not strategy, emotion, and this single fact explains more about financial outcomes than almost anything else. Let us look at the emotional forces most likely to affect your financial behavior. The first and perhaps most pervasive is stress. When you are under stress, the brain seeks relief. It looks for anything that can interrupt the discomfort of the stressful moment and create a feeling of ease, control, or pleasure. And spending money is one of the fastest ways the brain learns to create that relief. A purchase, however small, delivers a moment of engagement. It directs attention away from the source of stress. It creates a brief experience of choosing, of control, in a moment that otherwise feels overwhelming, and so spending under stress becomes a habit, not a conscious strategy. Not something you decide to do after careful reflection. It simply becomes what happens when the pressure builds. The problem is not the spending itself. The problem is that it bypasses your financial intentions entirely. You did not plan to spend that money. The stress arrived, the habit responded, and the intention did not get a chance to weigh in. This cycle, stress followed by spending, followed by brief relief, followed by financial pressure, followed by more stress, is one of the most common feedback loops in financial life. And because it operates below the level of conscious decision-making, it is difficult to interrupt without deliberate awareness. The second emotional force is comfort. Comfort spending is not always driven by stress. Sometimes it is simply the result of wanting to make a difficult or tedious day feel a little better. The workday was long. The week was exhausting. Something small feels like a deserved reward. And in isolation, that is not a problem. The issue arises when comfort spending becomes the default response to any moderately difficult experience. When the bar for reward spending is so low that it happens multiple times a week or daily, and the cumulative impact on savings is significant. The third emotional force is the feeling of scarcity. This one is nuanced. When people feel financially anxious, when they feel that there is not quite enough, they sometimes develop a relationship with money that is paradoxically destructive. The scarcity feeling creates urgency. It makes financial decisions feel heavy and loaded. And to escape that heaviness, the mind sometimes reaches for spending as a way of temporarily silencing the anxiety. Or it reaches for avoidance, not looking, not tracking, not thinking about it too carefully. Because thinking carefully about money when it feels scarce feels unbearable. And so the avoidance continues, and the anxiety continues beneath it. And the financial pattern remains unchanged. The fourth emotional force is status and social comparison. Humans are deeply social. We pay attention to how we appear relative to others. We are aware of what people around us seem to have, how they live, what they spend. And there is a quiet but powerful pressure to match what you perceive around you, to maintain a lifestyle that reflects a certain image, to not appear behind, to not feel left out of the experiences or possessions that seem normal in your social circle. This pressure drives financial decisions that have nothing to do with your personal financial situation. You spend to maintain an appearance. You avoid saying you cannot afford something. You buy things that signal belonging or success. None of this is shameful. It is profoundly human. But it comes at a financial cost that compounds over time, because the money spent on maintaining an image is money not available for building security. And the more income increases, the more the standard of the image tends to rise. So the cycle continues even as earnings grow. The fifth emotional force is the desire for immediate pleasure. This is closely related to the gap between intention and action we explored earlier. Immediate pleasure is real. It is tangible. The item in front of you is real. The experience you could have tonight is real. and it competes, in a very unequal fight, against the abstract future benefit of not spending that money now. The part of the brain that processes immediate reward is older and faster than the part that plans for the future. And so in the moment, the immediate pleasure usually wins, unless there is a deliberate structure in place to give the future a fighting chance. The sixth emotional force is regret avoidance. This one is often overlooked. Sometimes people make financial decisions not based on what they genuinely want, but based on the fear of missing out. The fear that not buying this thing, not participating in this experience, not taking this opportunity, will result in regret. And regret avoidance is a powerful motivator. It can make decisions feel urgent when they are not. It can make purchases feel necessary when they are not, because the mind would rather experience the mild negative outcome of an unnecessary purchase than the sharper pain of feeling like it missed something. Now, why does any of this matter? Because if you do not understand the emotional forces shaping your financial behavior, you will keep responding to them automatically. You will keep making the same decisions without knowing why. You will keep experiencing the same financial patterns without understanding their source. And you will keep trying to change through motivation and intention alone, which, as we have established, is not enough. Understanding your emotional relationship with money is not about therapy. It is not about excavating your childhood or analyzing every feeling. It is about recognizing in real time when emotion is driving a financial decision. That moment of recognition is enormously powerful because it creates a pause, and in that pause you have a choice. You can continue with the emotionally driven behavior, or you can ask one simple question: is this decision aligned with my financial goals? You do not have to suppress the emotion. You do not have to deny that you feel stressed or tired or in need of comfort. You simply introduce a moment of awareness between the feeling and the action, and that moment changes everything. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually over time, as the habit of pausing replaces the habit of automatic response. The pattern of emotionally driven financial decisions begins to shift. Let us look more closely at the emotional patterns that tend to repeat in financial life. One of the most common is the earn and spend cycle. Income arrives, spending increases to meet it. The end of the month arrives, very little is saved. The next income arrives, the cycle repeats. This pattern often intensifies as income grows. More income creates the feeling that more spending is now appropriate, and so the lifestyle expands, and the savings remain roughly the same. This is sometimes called lifestyle inflation, and it is almost entirely driven by emotion. The emotion of deserving more, the emotion of having earned the right to spend more, the emotion of wanting to experience what increased income can provide. None of those emotions are wrong, but when they are allowed to determine financial behavior automatically, without any structure to balance them, they create a pattern where income growth never translates into wealth growth. Another common emotional pattern is the all or nothing cycle. This is where financial discipline is approached like a diet. You are either completely on the plan or completely off it. When things are going well, you are saving, tracking, being careful. When one thing goes off track, the whole system collapses. One unexpected expense becomes an excuse to abandon the budget entirely. One difficult month becomes a reason to stop saving for the rest of the quarter. The all or nothing thinking is emotionally driven. It is the same perfectionism that says if I cannot do this perfectly, it is not worth doing at all. And it is devastating to financial progress, because perfection is not the standard. Consistency is. Doing something imperfectly every month for 10 years produces dramatically better results than doing something perfectly for 3 months and then stopping. The third emotional pattern is financial avoidance. We touched on this earlier, but it deserves more attention here. Avoidance is often rooted in a specific emotional experience. The feeling that looking closely at your finances will confirm something you do not want to confirm. that you are further behind than you should be, that you have made decisions you regret, that the numbers do not reflect the person you want to be. And so the statements go unopened. The budget is never built. The net worth is never calculated. The pattern is never examined. But here is what happens with financial avoidance. The situation does not pause while you look away. It continues. It evolves. Sometimes it worsens. And when you finally do look, there is more to confront than there would have been if you had looked sooner. The avoidance does not protect you. It simply delays the moment of reckoning and often makes it harder. There is another emotional pattern worth naming: the comfort of comparison. This is slightly different from the status comparison we discussed earlier. This is the tendency to manage financial discomfort by finding someone worse off to compare yourself to. At least I am not as far behind as that person. At least I do not have their level of debt. At least my situation is not as complicated as theirs. This comparison creates a false sense of security. It softens the urgency of your own situation by measuring it against someone else's struggles. And while it might momentarily ease the anxiety, it does nothing to address the actual pattern. The question is never how your situation compares to someone else's. The question is always whether your behavior is taking you in the direction you want to go. And if it is not, no amount of favorable comparison will change that. Managing your emotional relationship with money is not about eliminating emotion. Emotion is not the enemy. Awareness is the antidote. When you know your emotional triggers, when you can recognize that this feeling tends to lead to that financial behavior, you have something that most people never develop. Choice. The choice to respond differently. The choice to honor the feeling without letting it dictate the financial decision. The choice to pause, to breathe, and to ask whether the action you are about to take serves the financial life you are building. That pause, practiced consistently, is one of the most powerful financial habits you can develop. Not because it makes you emotionless, but because it puts you in control. Everything we have discussed so far, the patterns, the emotional forces, the gap between intention and action, points toward the same conclusion. Awareness alone is not enough. Knowledge alone is not enough. Even motivation at its peak is not enough. What is enough is structure, a system, a design for your financial life that operates reliably regardless of how motivated you feel, how emotionally calm you are, or how smoothly the month is going. Structure is the bridge between who you are and who you intend to become financially. Without structure, financial behavior defaults to whatever is most habitual, most emotionally driven, and most reactive. With structure, financial behavior follows a design that serves your long-term goals even on the days when you are not thinking about them. Let us look at what structure actually means in practical terms. The first and most foundational element of financial structure is a clear picture of your actual numbers. Not an estimate, not a rough sense. Your actual income, after everything is accounted for. Your actual expenses, categorized honestly. Your actual net worth, which is the difference between what you own and what you owe. Many people have a general sense of these numbers. But there is a significant difference between a general sense and precise knowledge. And that difference matters enormously for the decisions that follow. When you know your actual numbers, you make decisions with grounded clarity. When you operate on a general sense, you make decisions based on hope and approximation. And hope and approximation do not build financial stability. Getting clear on your numbers is not a complicated task. It requires time, honesty, and the willingness to look at what is actually there rather than what you wish were there. But it is the non-negotiable starting point for everything that comes after. The second element of structure is intentional allocation. This means deciding in advance where your money goes, not deciding after it arrives. Before, when your income enters your life, it should have a destination already assigned to it. A specific percentage or amount moves to savings automatically. A specific portion covers fixed expenses. A specific budget is allocated for variable spending. What remains after all of that is what is available for discretionary choices. This order matters enormously. Most people save what is left over after spending, and what is left over is almost always less than expected, because spending tends to expand to fill whatever is available. The structure that changes outcomes is the one where saving happens first, where the money is moved before the temptation to spend it has a chance to appear, where the allocation is automatic, not dependent on remembering, on willpower, or on how the month is going. Automation is one of the most powerful tools available in personal finance. When you set up automatic transfers to savings or investments, you remove the decision from the equation entirely. The behavior happens by design, not by choice in the moment. And because it does not require a choice in the moment, it is not vulnerable to the emotional forces that tend to derail financial intentions. It simply happens, every month, quietly, building over time. The third element of structure is a budget that reflects your values. The word budget carries uncomfortable associations for many people. It can feel like restriction, like punishment, like a detailed accounting of everything you are not allowed to enjoy. That framing is worth releasing. A budget is simply a plan for where your money goes. It is the written expression of your financial priorities. And when it reflects what actually matters to you, it does not feel like restriction. It feels like alignment. When you know how much is allocated to the things that genuinely bring you value, and you spend within that allocation without guilt, you are living in alignment with your financial structure. The discomfort comes not from having a budget, but from having a budget that is either too rigid, not reflecting real life, or not connected to any values you actually hold. A useful budget does not track every penny with anxious precision. A useful budget gives you clarity about the categories that matter most and ensures that money is moving deliberately in the right directions. The fourth element of structure is a defined financial goal, not a vague intention, not a feeling that you would like to be better off. A specific, measurable target, a number, a date, a clearly imagined outcome. I want to have a specific amount in savings by a specific time. I want to eliminate a specific debt within a specific period. I want to be investing a specific amount every month by the end of the year. The specificity matters because vague goals produce vague behavior. When the goal is clear, the behavior can be calibrated to reach it. You know exactly how much you need to save each month. You know exactly what decisions are aligned with the goal and which ones work against it. You have a standard against which to measure your progress. And progress, however modest, reinforces the behavior that created it. The fifth element of structure is regular review. Structure is not a set it and forget it system. It requires periodic attention, not daily, not obsessively, but regularly. Once a month, spending 30 minutes to look at your numbers, to assess whether the behavior of the past month aligned with the plan and to adjust if necessary. That regular review does several things at once. It keeps you honest. It catches drift early, before small deviations become large problems. It reinforces your awareness of the pattern, and it gives you an ongoing connection to your financial goals, keeping them vivid rather than letting them fade into abstraction. Regular review is the maintenance cycle for your financial structure. Without it, structure slowly decays. The automatic savings remain in place, perhaps, but the spending categories drift. The budget becomes outdated. The goals shift without acknowledgement, and the structure that was once clean becomes murky. Monthly review prevents that drift. Now let us talk about control. Control is the experience you have when you understand what is happening in your financial life and you are making deliberate decisions within a clear structure. It is not about perfection. It is not about never spending on something enjoyable. It is about the feeling of agency, the feeling that your financial life is shaped by your decisions, not by circumstances, emotions, or randomness. That feeling of control is not just emotionally satisfying. It is structurally productive. Because when you feel in control, you make better decisions. You make decisions from a place of clarity rather than reaction. You make decisions that are connected to your goals rather than driven by the moment. And because your decisions improve, your outcomes improve. And because your outcomes improve, your sense of control deepens. And a virtuous cycle builds. Control is the opposite of the financial anxiety that comes from not knowing where the money went. It is the opposite of the helplessness that comes from watching the same patterns repeat without understanding why. Control, as we are discussing it here, is not about tightly gripping every dollar. It is about having a clear enough understanding of your financial system that you can trust it, that you can live your life without constant financial anxiety because the structure is doing its job. That is the experience structure makes possible. Let us be direct about something. Building structure takes effort up front. Sitting down with your numbers is uncomfortable. Setting up a budget requires time. Deciding on financial goals requires honest self-reflection. Creating automatic systems requires practical steps. None of this is complicated, but it does require that you prioritize it. And for many people, that initial effort is the obstacle, not the maintenance, not the ongoing discipline. The starting. If that is where you are, here is what to hold on to. The discomfort of building the structure is temporary. It happens once, or occasionally as life changes. But the benefit of having the structure is ongoing. It runs in the background. It shapes behavior without requiring constant attention. It creates the conditions for the hidden law to work in your favor. Because once your behavior is shaped by deliberate structure, money begins to follow in a more predictable direction, not because of luck, not because of external circumstances, because of the law. Money follows behavior, and your behavior is now by design. There is a quality that separates people who achieve financial stability from those who remain stuck in cycles of earning and struggling. It is not intelligence. It is not opportunity. It is not even income level. It is consistency. The willingness to show up for the same financial behaviors month after month, year after year, without requiring dramatic results to stay motivated. Consistency is quiet. It does not make for compelling stories. No one builds a following by talking about how they saved the same amount every month for 15 years without missing once. But that behavior, invisible and unglamorous as it is, builds something that very few things in financial life can build. Compound outcomes. You are probably familiar with compound interest as a mathematical concept. A small amount of money, growing at a modest rate, reinvested over a long period, produces results that seem disproportionate to what was put in. The famous example is a small investment at a young age versus a larger investment made later in life. The earlier, smaller investment often outperforms the later, larger one, not because of the amount, because of the time, because of the compounding. But this principle applies far beyond investment accounts. It applies to behavior itself. Small financial behaviors, consistently practiced over long periods, produce outcomes that appear disproportionate to the individual actions. The modest monthly saving, done without interruption for 20 years, grows into something that represents real financial security. The habit of reviewing spending monthly, practiced over 5 years, produces a level of financial awareness and discipline that feels natural, not effortful. The automatic investment, set up and maintained without emotional interference, grows through market cycles into something that could not have been predicted from any single month's contribution. Consistency is what allows the compounding to work. Without consistency, there is no compounding. There is only sporadic action followed by long pauses, which produces neither the mathematical compounding of investment returns nor the behavioral compounding of developed habits. Let us look at what consistency actually requires. It requires removing the emotional conditions attached to the behavior. Not, I will save this month if things go well. Not, I will invest when I feel more financially confident. Not, I will track my spending when I have more time, simply the behavior. Without conditions, every month. The conditions will never be perfect. Life will always offer a reason to pause, to reduce, to delay. The month will always have something unexpected in it. There will always be a competing priority, a surprising expense, a period of emotional drain that makes financial discipline feel less urgent. Consistent behavior is the behavior that continues through all of that, not rigidly ignoring real circumstances, but fundamentally uninterrupted by the ordinary difficulty of life. Now, consistency does not mean inflexibility. There will be genuinely difficult periods. There will be months where the savings amount needs to be adjusted. There will be circumstances that require redirecting resources. Consistency is not about ignoring those realities. It is about returning to the pattern as quickly as possible when circumstances have shifted. It is about treating the pattern as the default, not the exception. The person who saves every month, except for a couple of genuinely difficult ones, and returns immediately to saving when those months pass, is practicing a form of consistency that still produces remarkable results over time. The person who saves when it feels easy and stops when anything complicates, it is practicing something else entirely, something that feels like effort but does not compound. Let us think about the timeline of consistent behavior. In the first month, consistent financial behavior feels effortful. You are new to the structure. You are overriding old habits. The reward is invisible. In the first 3 months, consistent behavior begins to feel more like routine. The automatic savings are automatic in practice. The tracking is a habit rather than a task. The structure is becoming normal. In the first year, you have data. You can look back and see that the pattern held. You can see the result of consistent saving. You can measure the gap between where you started and where you are now. That data is powerful. Not just practically, but psychologically. It proves to you that the behavior works. And that proof reinforces the behavior. In 3 to 5 years, the consistent behavior has produced outcomes that feel genuinely significant. The savings have grown. The investments are working. The financial habits are deeply ingrained. Doing them no longer requires the same effort they once did. They have become part of who you are financially. In 10 years, the compounding is unmistakable. The financial situation looks meaningfully different from what it would have looked like if the inconsistent pattern had continued. Not because of any single dramatic decision, because of the quiet, unglamorous, relentless consistency of the years that passed. This is the hidden law at work over time. Money following behavior. Behavior that was consistent. Behavior that compounded. Behavior that was never dramatic but was always present. There is something worth addressing directly here. Many people start a financial improvement plan with enthusiasm. They are genuinely committed. They save for the first month and feel good. They track their spending and feel proud. They hit a milestone and feel motivated. And then something happens that breaks the streak. An unexpected expense, a difficult period, a month where the budget did not hold, and the streak breaks, and the instinct, the deeply human instinct, is to feel that the effort has been undone, that the momentum is lost. That starting again somehow means starting from zero. That is not how consistency works. The months of saving that happened before the interruption are real. They did not disappear. The habit that was being built, the neural pathway being reinforced, the financial identity being developed, all of that remains. Starting again after an interruption is not starting over. It is simply resuming, and resuming quickly, without excessive self-criticism, without treating the interruption as evidence that you cannot do this, is itself a form of consistency. It is the consistency of returning to the pattern, of treating the structure as permanent and the interruptions as temporary. This reframe is important, because one of the most common reasons consistent financial behavior breaks down is the belief that one missed month, one budget failure, one poor decision makes the whole effort invalid. It does not. Nothing is invalid. Nothing is ruined. There is only the behavior of the next day, the next week, the next month. And that behavior is entirely within your control. Let us also acknowledge something about the pace of financial progress. It is slow. This is not a comfortable truth, but it is an important one. Genuine financial stability is not built in months. It is built in years. And for many people, the slowness of the process is what breaks their consistency. They expect to feel significantly different after 6 months. And when 6 months pass and the progress, while real, does not feel transformative, the motivation fades. The behavior becomes inconsistent, and the compounding pauses. The antidote is recalibrating your expectations to match the actual timeline of financial progress. Not because the timeline is discouraging, but because understanding it allows you to commit to it honestly. If you know that the significant results are 5 and 10 and 20 years away, you can build a relationship with the process that is not dependent on feeling dramatic progress in any given month. You can find satisfaction in the behavior itself, in the discipline of it, in the integrity of doing what you said you would do, in the quiet pride of a consistent pattern. That relationship with the process, rather than the outcome, is what sustains behavior across the long timelines that genuine financial progress requires. Consistency is not exciting, but it is transformative, and it is, in the end, the most reliable path to the financial life you are trying to build. Everything we have explored in this audiobook points toward a shift, not just a shift in behavior, a shift in how you think about money, in how you relate to it, in what you believe it responds to and why, because behavior flows from thinking. The financial habits you have right now are the product of how you think about money. And if you want different habits, you need to examine the thinking that generates them. Let us begin with one of the most fundamental shifts, the shift from money as something that happens to you to money as something you shape. Most people relate to their financial situation as though it is largely determined by external forces, the economy, the job market, the cost of living, the luck of when and where you were born. These factors are real. They are not imaginary. They do have an impact on financial circumstances, but there is a point at which placing all emphasis on external factors becomes a way of avoiding responsibility for the factors you can control, and the factors you can control are more significant than they are often given credit for. Within your current income, however modest or generous, there is a range of possible behaviors. There is a way of handling that income that compounds positively over time, and there is a way of handling it that maintains the same cycle indefinitely. The difference between those two paths is not determined by the external environment. It is determined by behavior, by your behavior, and your behavior is within your control. Shifting from a passive relationship with money to an active one is not about dismissing the real constraints of your situation. It is about focusing your energy on what you can influence. Because energy spent on what you cannot control is energy not available for what you can. The second shift in thinking is from short-term orientation to long-term orientation. This is one of the most impactful changes you can make in how you relate to financial decisions. Short-term thinking asks, how will this feel right now? Long-term thinking asks, how will this serve the life I am building? Those two questions produce very different answers to the same situation, and consistently applying the long-term question, not always to the exclusion of the short-term, but as a counterweight to it, changes the quality of financial decisions over time. Long-term thinking does not mean denying present pleasure. It does not mean living with relentless austerity. It means holding the future version of your life as a real and vivid presence in your current decision-making. When the future feels real, the present choices that support it feel meaningful. The saving does not feel like sacrifice. It feels like contribution to something you genuinely care about. That shift in framing is not trivial. It changes the emotional experience of financial discipline from deprivation to purpose. And purpose is far more sustainable than willpower. The third shift is from income-focused thinking to net worth thinking. Most people measure their financial health by income. If income goes up, they feel financially better. If income is high, they feel financially successful. But income, on its own, tells you very little about financial health. What matters is the gap between what you earn and what you keep. And what you keep, compounded over time, is what becomes net worth. Two people at identical incomes can have dramatically different net worths after 20 years, because one managed the gap between income and expenses intentionally, and one did not. Shifting your focus from income to net worth, from how much you earn to how much you are building, changes what you optimize for. You start paying attention to the gap, to how much is being kept, saved, invested, to whether the pattern of your financial behavior is growing what you own or simply maintaining a level of spending. That shift in focus creates a different relationship with financial decisions. Purchases are measured not just against current ability to afford them, but against their opportunity cost. What else could this money do? What does spending this represent in terms of future growth? That is not an anxious question. It is a strategic one, and strategic thinking produces different outcomes than purely responsive thinking. The fourth shift is from complexity to simplicity. Personal finance is often made to appear more complicated than it is. There are countless products, strategies, and frameworks competing for your attention, and the complexity can be paralyzing. When there are too many options, too many decisions, too many things to track, the most common response is to do nothing, to wait until things feel clearer. And clarity never comes because the complexity never resolves. The truth is that the most important financial behaviors are remarkably simple. Spend less than you earn. Save a consistent percentage of your income. Invest it in something reliable and long-term. Avoid high-interest debt. Review your numbers regularly. Repeat. These are not exciting recommendations. They are not the kind of strategies that inspire enthusiasm, but they are the behaviors that, practiced consistently over time, produce the most reliable financial outcomes. Embracing simplicity is not about ignoring nuance. It is about refusing to let complexity become an excuse for inaction. It is about identifying the few behaviors that matter most and doing those consistently, rather than chasing every new strategy. The fifth shift is from comparing yourself to others to competing with your past self. We discussed social comparison earlier as an emotional force that drives spending. But comparison also affects thinking in a broader way. When your measure of financial success is based on how you appear relative to others, you will never be satisfied. There will always be someone with more. There will always be a higher standard to chase. And the chase will consume resources that could be building your own financial stability. The measure that actually matters is this: am I in a better financial position today than I was 1 year ago? Is my net worth growing? Are my habits more aligned with my goals than they were? Is the pattern improving? Progress measured against your own history is both more honest and more motivating than progress measured against other people, because it is entirely within your control, because it reflects the actual work you have done, and because it is not subject to the endless escalation of social comparison. The sixth shift is from believing that financial transformation requires a dramatic moment to understanding that it requires a different ordinary. Many people are waiting for a turning point, a moment where everything changes, a windfall that resets the situation, a revelation that transforms the approach. But financial transformation does not work that way. It does not happen in dramatic moments. It happens in the ordinary ones, in the small decisions that repeat daily, weekly, monthly. In the ordinary Tuesday when you chose not to make an impulsive purchase. In the ordinary payday when the automatic transfer moved to savings before you had a chance to spend it. In the ordinary month end review when you looked at your numbers and found that the pattern was holding. The ordinary moments, repeated consistently, are where financial transformation actually lives. And once you understand that, the pressure of waiting for the dramatic moment releases, because you are already in the moment that matters. Every day is that moment. Every decision is that opportunity, and the accumulation of ordinary moments, consistent and aligned with the hidden law, is what builds the financial life you are working toward. You have reached the end of this audiobook, and before you move forward, it is worth taking a moment to sit with what you have learned. Not to summarize, not to review a checklist, but to let the ideas settle into something more than information, into awareness. We began with a question. Why do some people consistently build wealth over time, while others remain stuck in the same financial place? And the answer we have traced across every section of this audiobook is the same. It comes down to behavior, not talent, not luck, not even income. Behavior, the daily habits, the emotional patterns, the structures built or absent, the consistency practiced or abandoned, the gap between intention and action, and whether it has been closed. All of that, in its totality, determines the direction money flows in your life. And you now understand that, not as an abstract idea, but as a principle you have examined from every angle. The hidden law is no longer hidden from you. Money follows behavior. Specifically, it follows consistency, control, and long-term thinking practiced over time, not perfectly, not dramatically, quietly, persistently, reliably. Now, there is something important to acknowledge. Understanding this law does not automatically change your financial situation. Awareness is the beginning, not the end. What comes after awareness is action, and what sustains action over time is structure, and what structure produces over enough time is the compounded outcome of consistent behavior. That is the path. And you are now standing at the beginning of it, more clearly than before. There is a temptation at the end of something like this audiobook to feel that a great deal needs to change at once, to feel the pressure of everything you have heard and want to act on it all immediately. Let that pressure settle. The hidden law is a patient one. It does not require you to become a different person overnight. It requires that you take one clear step in the right direction, and then another, consistently, over time. Perhaps the first step is getting genuinely honest about your numbers, not an estimate, the actual picture. Perhaps the first step is setting up one automatic transfer to savings, however small, because the amount matters less than the behavior. The behavior is what the law responds to. Perhaps the first step is identifying one emotional pattern in your financial life that you now recognize clearly, not to judge it, but to pause the next time it appears, to introduce that single moment of awareness between the feeling and the action. Whatever your first step is, it matters, not because of the immediate financial impact, but because it is the beginning of a new pattern, and patterns, once begun, are easier to sustain than to start. You have already done the hardest thing, which is to spend this time examining the hidden forces at work in your financial life, to sit with the uncomfortable truths alongside the empowering ones. That willingness to look is not nothing. It is the beginning of the awareness that the law requires. As you move forward, remember this. Money is not controlled by luck. It is not determined by the external forces that surround you. It is shaped by patterns, by the patterns you practice every day, whether you are conscious of them or not. The moment you understand the pattern is the moment you begin to change your outcome. Not someday, not when conditions improve. Now, in the ordinary moments of your ordinary life, one consistent decision at a time, that is the hidden law. And now, it is no longer hidden from you.